Now, before that, we were in chapter 17, which is self-realization. And we understood that self-realization is really knowing who we are, knowing who we truly are, that we are that Sat Chit Ananda. We are of the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss, and abiding in that. That is called self-realization. It's not just knowing very casually. It's not just, oh, I had a thought that I could be this awareness, but it's a very deep abidance. It's almost like, just like I feel like I'm Shubhani or a woman right now, I know for a fact that I'm actually Brahman. And it's very natural. So this abidance has the sense of being very natural, being very effortless. It's not something that we have to tell ourselves anymore. That's how we know we're abiding in something. We don't have to tell ourselves, oh, this is, I am Brahman. We don't have to remind ourselves. We don't have to put forth any effort. It's just so natural. For example, making something in the kitchen, right? In the beginning, it's like step 1, step 2, step 3. Where is this ingredient? Where is that? How much to put of what? But after some time, it becomes so effortless. You know where everything is? It just moves in this and that, and you make it. It's done. It's effortless. You do it without even thinking, because it's become your nature, right? Abidance is that way. It's that we automatically feel like that. That's our nature. So that is self-realization. It's not a mere thought. It's not a mere glimpse, but it's an abidance. And we talked about now how a person gets or becomes self-realized through these 3 sadhanas, 3 jnana sadhanas, which we call Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. And Shravanam is systematic listening of the scriptures at the feet of a teacher. Shravanam. Mananam is reflection, reflecting on the scriptures, either by my own self, discussing it with a group of people, analyzing it, drawing similarities, drawing parallels to other texts. But it's really the process where I make everything clear and I become convinced about the knowledge. Because in Shravanam, we're just listening. So some things might not become clear. Some things might still seem gray, and how can this be, and how can that be? But when we do Mananam is when we really analyze. We really look at it deeply. The 3rd step is called Nididhyasanam, where once that knowledge is crystal clear, we are now assimilating it. We're now able to assimilate it. And so we contemplate on the knowledge. We contemplate on it. We think about it deeply. We make it part and parcel of us. That's called Nididhyasana. That is mostly done in the seat of contemplation, but after some time, it becomes part of our daily practice, just in doing whatever we do. So these are the 3 Vedantic sadhanas that we saw. And we also saw, now, Shravana might not work for so many people. Maybe some people find it so hard to just even listen. So hard to just even listen to a talk. Why? It could be that the problem is the distracted mind. Chitta vikshepa. The mind just cannot sit still. It's going like this and like that. And so therefore, japa or bhakti yoga, these yogas are prescribed to tame that mind, to make it so extremely focused so that it's able to listen and grasp. Otherwise, if that mind is not available, it becomes so difficult to listen. And many times when we are in satsang, that's when divine knowledge is revealed. So some people say it's just too hard because my mind is distracted. And so therefore, focus on the yogas. Some people say, forget my mind being distracted. I can't even think about it. It's polluted thinking about all these negativities. I can't help but worry or become anxious or have these ill feelings towards people. I don't know why I'm having all these negative emotions and feelings. And that happens to all seekers. And therefore, the scriptures prescribe karma yoga. If we feel this kind of mind which is full of impurity, do more karma yoga, because in service, in selfless, dedicated service, we become purer, we become more positive. We stop becoming so selfish because we're thinking more about other people. So this is what was prescribed. And the person who's able to go through this whole thing and realize the truth is a self-realized being. And the self-realized being is truly fulfilled, has fulfilled their purpose of life. It's not that they have to go run away and be in some cave, sitting down and closing their eyes. No, a self-realized being can be in and through the workforce, but they just have a different attitude. Their attitude is one of detachment, one of equipoise, one of fulfillment, one of equanimity. Very different from how a regular person would be in this world. Now the question is, why is it that some people get it and some people don't? Why is it that some people are able to absorb it? In Shravanam, in listening, they're able to get it. But sometimes other people just don't get it. Or why is it that some people can actually abide and practice this knowledge, but some people just can't? Why is there such a vast difference amongst all of the students that come to Vedanta? Why is there a vast difference? Why is it easier for some people and harder for others? That is because of what we call Sadhana Chatushtaya. You see, before we go into Sadhana Chatushtaya, there are 3 factors in gaining knowledge, and gaining any knowledge. But in this case, we're talking about spiritual knowledge. The first factor is called the prameya. Prameya means that which is to be known, or the object of knowledge, that which is to be known. That's called prameya. The second factor is called pramana. Pramana means the means of knowledge. How are we going to learn that knowledge? Pramana. And the third factor is called pramata, means the student of that knowledge. Now, in other fields, there could be, why knowledge isn't taking place, it could be because there's a defect in the object, or there's a defect in the means of knowledge, in the method of knowledge, or there's a defect in the student. In day-to-day life, it could be that the object of knowledge is faulty. We're trying to know something that really can't be known. Maybe something in outer space we're trying to know, but it's really not there. And we're just sort of imagining that it could be there. So it could be in the object. We're trying to know something that's just really not there. It could be in the means of knowledge. We know that in our education system, some of our textbooks have wrong information. They have misinformation. And so when the means of knowledge have misinformation, the knowledge gained it's misinformed, right? The source could be faulty, or something could be untrue. Of course, we see it all the time in the internet, right? How do you know what's true, what's not true? Therefore, what we learn, we don't know if it's really, really true. So the object could be faulty, the means of knowledge could be faulty, or the student also could be faulty. Maybe the student just wasn't paying attention. So the student got half of what it was supposed to, everything that was given, the student just got half. And it happens so many times where we go somewhere and they're like, oh, what did you hear? Like, oh, I just heard these 2 things or these 3 things, right? Now, when it comes to the knowledge of Vedanta, let us look at the prameya. What are we learning about? We're learning about Brahman. Brahman, which is the self, that pure self, existence, consciousness, bliss. That pure self is defect-free. There's no defect in Brahman. Brahman is as pure as it gets, the purest of the pure. So there cannot be any defect on that. So prameya is Brahman. What is our pramana? What is our means of knowledge? Our means of knowledge are scriptures, what we have seen as the Mahavakyas, which come in the Upanishads. They are the scriptures. Why are they defect-free? They are defect-free because our scriptures are not man-made. They're not written by any individual being. If any individual being writes scripture, so many defects can take place. How so? Maybe that individual's knowledge is very limited, so they cannot really go deep into the subject. Maybe that individual has biases about their own views, and those biases will be expressed in that book, that text, or that scripture, whichever they write. Maybe there's something that the individual neglected, and so that will also be in that text. So our scriptures are not man-made. They are actually divine revelations. They're not written by one person. They are revealed to by our rishis at the seat of their contemplation. And those revelations were passed on from generation to generation. Later on, Vyasaji compiled them and put it together as the Veda. And that's why our texts, our Vedas, have no author there. There's no author to any Upanishad because they firmly believe that it was no individual who wrote it. It was a divine revelation. And so those scriptures are defect-free. And our means of knowledge is not only the scriptures, but it's the Guru Parampara, that teacher. For us, we come from a lineage of Guru Parampara. They are the ones who live this knowledge. And so therefore, a true Guru, of course, there are many, many fake Gurus. So I'm speaking about a true Guru. There are many people who pose as Gurus for something or the other. We will see this in Bhaja Govinda. This just doesn't only happen now. This happened thousands of years ago. Adi Shankaracharya wrote it. He wrote it, that some people do pose as Gurus. Sometimes there are fake Gurus that come around. But I'm speaking about a real Guru. A real Guru who gives real knowledge is someone who's really abiding by that scripture, living that scripture. Only then can they really communicate it. Otherwise, we cannot communicate something we don't live. It becomes very difficult. So we see therefore that there's no defect in the object of knowledge, which is Brahman. There's no defect in the means of knowledge, which is the Veda, the Upanishads, and that the very Guru is the embodiment of it. Again, I said a real Guru. The defect lies in the student. The dosha or the defect therein, it lies in the student. That's where the defect is. That's where the difference is. This is what we call adhikari bheda. Means there's a difference in the qualifications of the student. So it's not the scripture's fault that we're not getting it. It's definitely not Brahman's fault. And it's definitely not the Guru Parampara, the lineage of gurus that we come from. It's not their fault. But it is our fault only. It is our qualification. If it is much higher, then we are able to absorb this knowledge and get it. But if it's much lower, then we're not really able to get it. It takes a lot of repetition for it to really stick. Many times people say, is it the place? Maybe only in India people get this kind of knowledge. We have to go to India to get this kind of knowledge. There's no such thing. It doesn't depend on the place. And some people say it's the time. Maybe for young people only this knowledge works. When we're older, it's just, we can't do it anymore. No, Our scriptures never say that. They say it's not based on place. It's not based on time. It's not even based on body or gender. It's not based on any of these factors. Our scriptures clearly say it is based on these 4 qualifications. If the student has these 4 qualifications in full measure, then that knowledge that they gain, they will be able to live immediately. But if the student does not have these 4 qualifications, then they cannot live this knowledge. They will have a difficult time. They will have many challenges. These 4 qualities, which are the determining factor of us being able to digest and live this knowledge, are called Sadhana Chatushtaya. Sadhana Chatushtaya. Now, sadhana means methods, ways. Chatushtaya means 4-fold. Okay? So now I will answer the questions a little bit later. All right. Sadhana Chatushtaya, 4-fold means are these 4. And I'll say it first in Sanskrit, and then I will translate it in English. Okay? And then we will go into each one to analyze. The first one is called Viveka. And if you want to see where I am in self-unfoldment, we are in chapter 18 now. The first one is called Viveka. Viveka means discrimination. The second one is called Vairagya, which means dispassion or detachment. The third one is like a zip file. It's got 6 in it. Okay, so it's like a zip file, the third one. First one in the third, number 3-1 is called Shama, or control of mind. Dama, control of senses. Uparama, withdrawal of activity. Titiksha, endurance. Shraddha, faith. And Samadhanam, single-pointedness. So third qualification is really 6. Okay? And the fourth qualification is what we call mumukshutva, which means desire for liberation. Now, all of these are in your self-unfoldment texts. So if you were not able to write it down, don't worry, it's okay. They're all there. Now, first we will take one by one, and then whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer. Right. The first one is called Viveka. When we hear this word discrimination, we think, okay, it's gender discrimination, racial discrimination. But this Viveka is really discrimination between 2 things. And in daily life, we do it all the time. Which vaccine am I going to take? This one or this one, right? Which place am I going to visit? Right, whenever this becomes over, what's the first place that I'm going to visit? This one or this one? Should I keep my children in school, or should they just be at home? Should I do this or should I do that? So there are many decisions we have to make, and this Viveka is something that we do to distinguish between which is better and which is not better. And we saw this in Shreyas and Preyas. So I don't know if you remember this whole thing we did. This is Shreyas, this is Preyas. This is the path of good, this is the path of pleasant. And we sort of put those 2 apart from each other and evaluated it, and we said, okay, this is the way to go. Shreyas is the way to go. Here, the discrimination is really between what is permanent and what is impermanent. This is the first qualification of a seeker. The first qualification of a seeker is being able to discern what's permanent, what's impermanent. And in order to do this, the seeker has to examine life. Socrates once said, the unexamined life it's not worth living. And so many of us live our daily lives without examining anything. We just go about doing the same thing over and over again, going to the same places, meeting the same people, eating the same food. We live in this routine, but how many of us actually stop and examine life? How many of us actually say, wow, this is life. This is what it is. So therefore, our Rishi said, look at life. Look at the impermanence of life. There is an impermanence in everything. There's an impermanence in the things that we own. How they last barely. Some things, a computer that we have now doesn't last very long, or a car that we have doesn't last very long. Before, they would make cars that would last way longer, but now they make it so that it won't last longer, right? There's this beautiful documentary called The Light Bulb Conspiracy, and how, they used to make light bulbs to last like 50, 100 years. But then after they figured out they weren't making money, they made it last less number of years. So we see that things around us, they don't last very long. They're impermanent. Not only that, but people around us are also impermanent. People come, people go. People, as someone that we love, someone who's near and dear to us, cannot be there all the time. It's just a fact. Death is a fact of life. Nobody comes out of life alive. So that body also has to go. We find that our experiences are also impermanent. The joys that we experience in certain moments, in certain times, that also goes. Sorrows that we experience, that also goes, but it's very impermanent. It keeps fluctuating. Our worth is also impermanent. People are with us as long as we have certain things. When we don't have it, they leave. And this is clearly what we see in Bhaja Govinda, isn't it? Sometimes people are with people because of money. So the minute that person loses money, the friends leave. Sometimes people are with a certain people because of a position, of power. So a person of position and power has so many people around him or her. Once they lose that position or power, everybody leaves. Very few will remain. Some people like someone because of their face, of their looks, and so in their career, maybe they're the top musician or the top athlete or something. The minute they get into drugs or they get into an accident or they're no more good, they cannot sing, they cannot play, nobody wants them anymore. So it's not only things that are impermanent. It's not only people that are impermanent. Experiences, our own self-worth is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. And so the seeker comes to realize there is so much impermanence, but what I am seeking is permanent. What I am seeking is permanent joy. And I am seeking permanent joy. How will I find it in the impermanent? How will I find permanent joy in the impermanent? It won't be there. It cannot be there. And therefore, that conviction that this whole entire world is impermanent and there is something permanent there, something different from it. And that is what I want. That is called Viveka. That's called discrimination. The conviction that I want what's permanent. I know what's permanent, I know what's impermanent, and I want what's permanent. And so we come to Viveka. And of course, this comes with being able to examine life. The second one is called Vairagya. Now, Many people have a very, weird notion of Vairagya, thinking that you have to leave your house and you have to leave whatever you're doing to cultivate this detachment or dispassion. So I want to really, really hone in on these definitions so that we're very clear. Okay? So, and this all comes in a text called Tattva Bodha, which eventually we will study. But just to reiterate Viveka, then we'll move on to Vairagya. Viveka says, what is meant by discrimination between permanent and the impermanent? The reality alone is eternal and everything else is ephemeral. The conviction alone is discrimination between permanent and impermanent. Okay? Now we move on to dispassion or Vairagya. What is dispassion? The absence of desire for enjoyments in this world and in heaven. That is called dispassion. Why? Now I realize that all of this is impermanent. Therefore, I don't see any more joy in it. That's called Vairagya. I'm ready to drop my dependence, drop my seeking, drop my pursuit for happiness in impermanent things because it's not there. It is as silly as this. Imagine if we went to Whole Foods. Everybody knows Whole Foods. Imagine if we went to Whole Foods looking for a computer. Right? Imagine if we say, okay, I'm in Whole Foods now. What aisle can I buy a computer? And they're going to say, well, there's no computer here. You're like, no. I really think there are computers in Whole Foods. I really think. What aisle is it? They're like, no, but there's not. No, but I see like these boxes. Maybe they could be computers. And so you go through the whole Foods and you realize, oh my God, there's no computers here. And so the person says, go to the Apple store, go to, go somewhere else, go to Best Buy and you'll find a computer there. And then you will be like, yeah, okay, yes, I'll find a computer there. And so as silly as going to Whole Foods, wanting to buy a computer, we obviously know there's no computer there. It's as silly as us going out into this world, which is impermanent, saying, I'm going to get permanent happiness there. Let me go through this experience, this experience of this vacation and everything like that, because I'm going to get permanent happiness there. Let me go through this social engagement, social interaction, because I'm going to get permanent happiness there. That is the silliest thought that we have. And the dropping of that thought is called Vairagya. So it's not that we won't act in the world. We won't act in the world to gain permanent joy from there. We will do whatever we have to do. We will do our duties. We will do our daily activities. But all of that action is just so that we can come back within, because we know that here is the source of joy, not out there. So Vairagya is really this absence of desire for the world. It's dropping the world, means dropping my wanting or notion of that the world will fulfill me. It's dropping that notion. So I don't desire the world anymore. I don't want to pursue it for permanent joy anymore because it's not there. That's called detachment. And if, some people don't like this term detachment, you flip it around and you call it's independence. It's independence. I'm not dependent on the world anymore. I know that there's a deeper sense of joy within, and that's what I'm going to pursue. That's what I'm going to work on because it's there. It's not outside. That's called dispassion, Vairagya. And this dispassion, detachment, or if we want to call independence, it comes in several forms and ways. There's some which are like very, very light, like smashana vairagya. Smashana vairagya means the Vairagya or the dispassion we get after someone passes away. After someone passes away, who doesn't become Vairagi? Everyone's like, I don't want this world anymore. I'm not going to pursue this anymore. I really want to look into the deeper meaning of life. They get into these moments. But after a week or so, it's back to normal, right? This is not Vairagya. This is just like a flash of Vairagya. There are some people also who have Vairagya for certain things, but not for other things. Yeah, I have Vairagya from nuts. Yeah, because you're allergic to it. But I don't have Vairagya for chocolate, right? I have Vairagya for all citrus things. Oh, because you can't eat it. That's not Vairagya. That means you detach from it because you know you can't have it. Vairagya is not selective. It means I don't see permanent joy in the whole world. That's Vairagya. I don't see permanent joy in the whole world. In every single thing, every single being, every single experience, I don't see joy in there. That doesn't mean I won't engage. It's just that I'll do whatever it takes, but I know the sense of joy is here. And therefore, I'm ever detached. I can be without expectation, going here and going there, because I don't need any joy from the world. So that is dispassion. Now, when this discrimination and dispassion become full, become, ripe, they now lead into the sixfold wealth, which is the next step 3, sixfold wealth, Shamadhi Shatka Sampatti. They're called the sixfold wealth. And this is what Bhagavan, or Bhagavati actually, Bhagavati Lakshmi symbolizes. Many people think that Lakshmi Mata is the goddess of wealth, and sometimes we think that it is, money. It is not. She's the giver of these 6 qualities, these 6 wealths. And these 6 wealths start from what we call Shama. Shama is Mano Nigraha. Mano Nigraha means control of the mind. So now imagine where we're getting into the qualities. What is this control of the mind? It is the biggest challenge that we face. How to really control this mind? First of all, what is this mind? We realize that this mind is a flow of thoughts. It's a flow of thoughts. And actually, every day we have some, like they say, over 60,000 thoughts just flowing and flowing and flowing and flowing into the mind. And that mind, it's very hard for that mind to sit in one place, to stay in one place. It's very hard to just be where the body is. Many times, our bodies are here, but our mind is somewhere else. So for the mind and body to be together, it requires a special skill, a special quality, and that is called Shama. Now, how do we bring about this control of mind? Many people ask, how? First, we will go to the grosser level. We'll go to the grosser level, which is Dama. Then we will come to Shama. Because when we go to Dama and we tackle it at a grosser level, then it'll be easier to tackle at the subtler level. The second of the qualities is called Dama, which is control of senses. So as I said, we will work with the gross first, control of senses. What does this mean? Our senses, the Upanishads say, have an outward tendency. They have a tendency to just want to go and look out. They have a tendency to just want to be out. But Dhamma is being able to turn those senses in. Not only turn those senses in, but use our senses in moderation. Use them intelligently. Not in a way wherein they drain our energy, but they actually rejuvenate us. There's this beautiful verse in Viveka Chudamani. It says, Adi Shankaracharya ji says, look at these 5 animals. Just explore these 5 animals. We have a moth, what we call patanga. A moth sees light. It sees light and it gets so extremely tempted by light that it flies into the light. And when it flies into the light, it meets its death. We have a deer. A deer loves the sound of the mridanga. But the deer knows it's the hunter trying to tempt him or her. But the deer still hears the sound, and wants to go towards that beat. And then the deer meets its death. The hunter is able to shoot that deer. We have the bee. The bee has a sense of smell and enjoys the pollen coming from flowers. Now, there are some flowers which are open in the daytime, and at nighttime they close. Now, the bee is so tempted by that sense of smell, by that fragrance, just wants to rush into that fragrance. And what happens? Nighttime, flower closes, and the bee meets its death. We have the elephant. The elephant in mating season is very, has that sense to want to touch, want to feel. And so what happened, very sad thing that they do with the male elephants and the female elephants is that they put a trap in the middle. So the male elephant thinks it's going to meet the female elephant in this mating season, but really he's going into a trap, and that elephant meets its death because of this uncontrollable sense of touch. Then we have the fish. Fishes in the water. How many times they've seen the worm, they've seen other fish get killed, but yet they cannot help it. They see that bait in the water and they just want to taste it, and they meet their death. And Adi Shankaracharya ji says, each one of these animals with one sense, with not being able to control one sense organ, they meet their death. Think about how humans have 5 sense organs. When we're not able to control them, we too meet our death. This is Dama. Dama is being able to manage our senses well. And as I said, I'm starting with Dama first, the senses, then we'll go to the mind, because the mind is Sattva. How do I manage my senses well? It doesn't say, our scriptures never say, close your eyes, close your ears, close your mouth, don't eat anything, don't touch anything. Our scriptures are not don't. Our scriptures are like choose. Choose where our eyes fall. Clearly, there are certain places, certain things, where if we see or if we look, we will get disturbed. We will get disturbed. There's another very nice verse in Viveka Chudamani. It says that the black cobra, if you take sense organs and the black cobra, who's more destructive? Sense objects and the black cobra, which is more destructive? It is said sense objects are more destructive. Why? Because with the black cobra has to bite you and then you become poisoned. But the sense objects, you just have to look once and we become poisoned. This is what happens. So there are clearly some things that we see which will cause disturbance. Some negative things which we see, which will make the mind disturbed. And so Dhamma means don't let those things enter. Don't see those things. See that which is auspicious. See which is going to beautify the mind. Because the mind is made up of what we perceive with our senses, what we experience with our senses. Clearly, there is some things that we hear which are good for us, scriptures, etc. But some things are not good. So then why let those negative things enter our ears? Because that will make up the texture of our mind. Please see, the mind is made up of what we gather through our senses. That's what makes up our mind. And that is why, if we want to see why is our mind that way, what are our interactions like? Depending on our interactions in the world, that's what the mind is like. Sense of food, taste. Food is also, it also makes up the mind. In our scriptures, it's very clear. The kind of food that we eat also makes up the mind. The kind of things that we touch, that we interact with, that also makes up the mind. So if we know that something is going to be or to hinder us from evolving and growing spiritually, why subject our senses to that? So Dama meaning number one is subject our senses to that which will make us grow. Engage our senses intelligently. It doesn't mean disengage, it means engage our senses intelligently. Be selective. Dhamma meaning number two means engage our senses moderately. Because even the good thing, if it's too much, it's draining, right? So yes, we like watching great satsangs on YouTube, etc. But the eyes also must rest at a certain time. We cannot keep gluing our eyes there for so long, right? Yes, it is nice to eat sattvic food, but we should also know how much to eat. There are many people who say, yeah, we have a sattvic diet, but there's so much of it they're going to eat. So also how much to take in. Yes, it is sattvic to hear beautiful things, but know also when to shut down. So it's not only engaging the senses intelligently, but it's engaging it moderately. That is called Dhamma. That's called Dhamma. And when I'm able to work with Dhamma, when my Dhamma is strong, then what happens is my Shama, my mind control, can be strong. Because then my mind will be, it's easier. It will be filled with goodness only. If it's filled with all these negative things coming in, it's very difficult to work with that mind. So that is why I first started with Dhamma, because it starts there. It starts with being selective about our environment. And I know that this thought will come, that it's not always possible to regulate everything and to make sure we are in a conducive environment. I agree fully that there are some circumstances where we're just in an environment that's just maybe not very sattvic or not very conducive. Then what happens then? What happens then is that you become that conducive sattvic person in that environment. You become that change. That is what it is. So that is called Dhamma. Now today, I will just recap what I've done so far so I can leave some time for questions. The rest of the qualifications we will do next week. Okay? So just going to recap. What it is here is that today we talked about Sadhana Chatushtaya, means fourfold means, fourfold qualifications. Why? Because this is the reason why some people are able to get it, some people are not able to get it. Some people are able to abide in this knowledge, some people are not able to abide. Those who have these fourfold qualities in full measure can abide in this knowledge, can live it, can practice it. Those who do not have these fourfold qualities will have challenges. The more qualities we have, the easier it will be. The less, the harder it will be. Where do these qualities start from? Number one, Viveka, knowing what is permanent versus what is impermanent. And in really, really gauging how so many things can be impermanent, understanding that there's only one truth, and that truth is permanent. I may not know the nature of that truth, I may not know too much about it, but that's permanent. That's where I should be headed. And Vairagya, or dispassion, detachment, or independence, is knowing that, you know what? I don't need to pursue this world anymore for permanent joy because it's not there. And so the relationship with the world is very different. It's not that I'm pursuing it for joy. It is that I am working in it, I am living in it, I am being in it. But all I am doing is just so that I can come within and realize that joy. So I'm not engaging in the world so I can get joy from there. I'm engaging in the world so that I can turn within and realize the joy here. Then we have number 3, which is the sixfold wealth. Today we talked primarily about Dama in that, which is control of senses. And that control of senses has 2 aspects. One is to engage the senses intelligently, and number 2 is engage the senses moderately. And upon doing that, that helps with the texture of our mind. Then it becomes easier to control our mind and go to Shama. Okay, so this much is where we will stop today. Now I will go to any questions that there are. So there are some questions here. Looking at many holy texts with the 2021 lens, seems like they don't apply. Is there anything in the Vedas that you would say does not apply in 2021 or not appropriate for 2021? So when we look at the Vedas, there are a huge body of knowledge, right? They're huge, huge, huge. And in the Vedas, yes, there are a lot of things that do not apply today. Definitely. But remember when we saw the Vedas, there are 2 sections, right? There's what we call Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda is the action section. Jnana Kanda is the knowledge section. One is more like the ritual section, practices, religious practices. One is the philosophy section. So in the rituals, the religious practices, those that are in the Vedas from that time, they may not be relevant today. Many of them may not be relevant today. And because they're not relevant today, that's not the crux of the Vedas. That was a methodology for one to purify their mind to go deeper. So in that section, what we take today is the spirit of it. So for example, we do not perform such elaborate rituals, but we do karma yoga, which is selfless service. So we take the spirit of it. Now in the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas, which is the philosophy portion, that is timeless. Because in that philosophy portion, it is saying that you are the self, that Sat Chit Ananda, that is timeless knowledge. That is still very, very much implemented or useful today. Yeah, here. When carrying out duties in a detached way, your senses are overwhelmed by listening or seeing upsetting things, like example, COVID right now. How to engage senses moderately. So here, the thing is, there's so much that we are listening to, or, especially with COVID, there's news, there's people talking, there's people doing things. And sometimes also we watch news. We ourselves also choose to watch so much news. We also ourselves choose to read so much news. So what we can do is make sure we have a practice that centers ourselves, right? Choose to read something in the morning instead of turning on news, turning on the paper, looking at the New York Times or whatever. You read something that can really elevate you, that can really empower you. So what happens is you start the day with the right mindset. You start the day with better thinking. And you're more able to take all of that other news because you've just read something, you've just listened to something so divine. In the same way, end the day the same way. End the day with listening to something divine, reading something, or a chant or a prayer, because this will also help ground us. So I know throughout the day, sometimes we cannot help it because these things are around us. But at least if we can start the day and ground ourselves with something very uplifting and end our day with something very uplifting, that makes a huge difference in one's day. Huge difference. Okay. Yes. So listening to these chants on Spotify, do they help? They do help. They do help. Better to find the right kind of frequency. Huh? So, because when we're dealing with mantras, everything we've learned vibrates at a certain frequency. So definitely there are certain mantras that when you listen, automatically you feel calm. You just feel calm if they're pronounced or said the right way. So if we are listening to something in Spotify, that's very good. But see if you can find something that's chanted or said the right way. And I mean, I can help you decide if it is so, but that would be better to listen to something that is authentic, pronounced, chanted the right way, so that you get the full benefit of that chant. So these are helpful, listening to chants, listening to bhajans. I remember when I was younger and we were going to school, we had a carpool system. And it was my uncle had to pick me up or whatever. And his rule is that on the way to school, you must sing bhajans. So we didn't have, so the radio was there, but he's like, no radio. Everybody sing 111 bhajan. And by the time everybody sang bhajans, we were at school. And that's how we grew up. And which is very nice, So, and that way we were subject to that. Every morning we heard God's name on the way to school, and we don't realize the importance of it, but it does create a deep samskara. What you say samskara, it does create a deep impression on children, on people who are growing up, so then they enjoy listening to that. Just like if it's something that your mother or father used to put on when you were a child, you enjoy, you relish listening to that. The same way. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? Why am I not getting this knowledge? Why am I not being able to practice it? Why am I having such a hard time? The answer will always be because we lack sadhana chatushtaya. Because we lack sadhana chatushtaya. That will always be the answer. So if we know what they are, and if we can consciously be aware of them, we can start practicing them in small, small ways. Okay? All right. Close here, closing prayer. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So I'll see you next